What's up everybody, and welcome back to my guides, starting with Season 2 of Dragonflight. Today we're going to go through the Underrot. We're just going to go a quick fire dungeon guide, nothing too intense or in-depth, but just going to go through the things that you really need to watch out for, which will help you make these runs a lot smoother if you're pugging or if you're in a group. So let's go and have a look at this 17 Underrot that I did a few days ago on stream. This pool's a little small, but I like doing this just for the safety of it. It's a maggot and a blood matron. Now the difference here is that the maggot will do a frontal that'll target a random player, which is called Rotten Bile. You need to make sure you displace that or stun that. I'm on my DK, so I can just use Death Grip to get rid of it. Now the matron is going to be using Savage Cleave, which it'll charge to a player. I'm pretty sure it's the furthest player. So it'll target them with Blood Harvest and then cleave on that spot and do a frontal towards that player. So all you have to do is move away from it. Now also, if you saw, the matron did an ability called Warcry that increases the haste, and I'm pretty sure the damage as well, by quite a substantial amount. So you need to make sure that if you're pulling that with ticks or anything with interrupts or the worms, you need to make sure that you're really on point with the CCs and the interrupts, because their cast speed is going to be a lot quicker. Now we're killing this 4-pack next. We don't want to bring any ticks, and you want to be careful of these pats as well, because the patrols, they obviously patrol on either side. So you need to make sure that you're not going not going close enough to those patrols. Otherwise, it could get very nasty very quickly. Now you've got the headhunter here. That is the one that does a snare, and that'll keep a player rooted in place. Now, if that is combined with the matron running towards that same player and doing a frontal, that could be problematic, so you need to make sure you're looking out for where that is. Now, the snare is all random, so just be careful of that. Now, the main person that we need to focus here is the priest. Now, the priest does a bunch of abilities. One, it'll just randomly cast Blood Bolt, I'm pretty sure, which is going to be the same ability that the boss does. It does Gift of Gahoon, and it also does a regeneration. Now, Gift of Gahoon, you can purge it, so that's not really a problem, but that pretty much makes it unkillable unless you do purge it, so it'll just stay at one health the entire time. And the Reconstruction or Regeneration will heal it to full, so you need to make sure you interrupt that too, and that will happen once it gets to low health. So we're going to go to the next pack here. Same packs here. Priest, two headhunters, so there's going to be 2 roots, and then the priest is what you want to focus on. Now the omen, as you can see, is targeting me, and then the harrowing darkness is a fear, so you need to make sure you interrupt that fear. So make sure when you're doing these keys, you want to kind of have either an auto marker so people in your pug group know what to interrupt and what is important, or at least if you're in a group in Discord and you're with a bunch of friends, you actually dictate who should be interrupting what with certain markers. Otherwise, people tend to overlap interrupts a lot, and it gets a little annoying, especially on this boss here. Now on Tyrannical, this boss having blood bolts going off on the tank is pretty rough. This is also where we're going to pop our first lust. Now on Fortified, you probably pop your first lust on the first pull, and you'll just go a bit bigger instead of popping it on the boss. But this boss, you want to make sure you have an interrupt rotation and you're getting all the interrupts here. Now, all you're interrupting is Blood Bolt, and then there's going to be 2 abilities you need to dodge, which is going to be the Creeping Rot, which is the frontal, which also this ad mimics as well, and the Sanguine Feast, which is the small area of effect around the boss's hitbox, which you don't want to be in the hitbox. You can still attack the boss, you just need to make sure you're out of the hitbox. So with the Blood Bolt, I'm on my DK, I can grip it. For some reason, you can't Typhoon it, and you can't Ring of Peace it, which is kind of weird, because I can grip it, and they're all considered displacements, so I don't know what Blizzard's doing there, but that's a bit weird. As a DK, I can AMS the Blood Bolts if my team cannot get those interrupts, but like I said, you want to be nuking down the ad and trying to get those interrupts as much as possible. If the interrupts go off, and there's too many of them, the tank's just going to get absolutely destroyed very, very quickly. And if you get hit by any of these abilities, like the Creeping Rot or the Sanguine Feast, you're probably going to die very quickly as well, depending on the level of the key. Besides that, this boss is pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory. Only 2 or 3 abilities you really need to watch out for, sorry. And we're going to kill the boss, and we're going to go to the next area. We're running down this ramp here. Now this is the part where a lot of people get a bit confused. You need to go a certain path in between these mobs, pretty much hugging the side of this tree right here in the middle. Now you can go to the right and pull these. You definitely do not want to go to the left and pull these, because this pack is just not worth it. There's too much damage coming out. It's just, all the ticks will die, the maggots will all do frontals. It's very bad. So you can do this right pack if you want to be safe, but I like to just run through here, pull the 3 rots and then the 2 lashes as well. Because you want to make sure that you have enough interrupts and enough people to interrupt all the mobs you are going to pull. Not to mention, it is bolstering this week that I'm doing it. So if I pull too many mobs and the DPS don't kill everything at the same time, regardless of the changes to bolstering, they will still hurt a lot to the tank, and I'd rather be alive. So we're going to walk out of this entangling. Entangling, by the way, is one of the new affixes that Blizzard implemented in Season 2 of Dragonflight in replacement of one of the older affixes. So then we're going to grab these 3 lashes. Now with the lashes, you can pull 2 other mobs. You don't want to pull more lashes, it's just a bit much. But right now, I think I'm just going to stick with keeping these 3 by themselves, because I don't want to overdo it. You can be pretty safe with Underrot. It's not really, like, you don't really need to go too quickly, especially at this level. But again, it all depends on who you have in the group and how experienced and how geared you guys are. So we're going to grab the Living Rots, the Lashes, the Swarmer. So now to have a idea of what these guys do. Now, the Swarmer is your main target. This one will target a random player, and it will hurt them a lot, and it will enrage them. You want to kind of stun them, keep them away from the person, because they'll do a lot of damage to the targeted person. Also, they'll do an ability called Sonic Screech, which will silence everyone if it goes off, and make sure you interrupt it. It also does a lot of damage, so it's not fun. The Lashes will do an ability where you need to interrupt, otherwise it'll put the person to sleep, which is not good either, but you can remove it by just dispelling it, or you can heal the person to full health, and it will remove the debuff as well. Now the maggot does come in because it patrols there. You got to be careful about this, especially on bolstering week. That maggot's going to be very, very strong if we kill all this at the same time. The Living Rots, as you can see, all they do is just put stuff under them. You just got to keep moving. If you stay in there too long, it will start hurting a lot. So those are those mobs. Pretty simple. Now we're just going to pull these, kill them all. Again, Rotten Bile, you want to make sure you're stunning that. And you just need to move around the room. Make sure you're not pulling too much of the same kind of mob. As you can see, one of our DPS gets absolutely destroyed by the bolstered Swarmer, which does happen quite often in high fortified. That Swarmer will probably two-shot you on like a 20 on fortified, so it is a little bit scary. So you want to make sure you're having your roots and your slows and your stuns ready to go for that. Now we're going to go for the next pull, which is again a Swarmer, a Rot, let's see, 2 Rots, 3 Rots, a Lasher, and a Maggot. So we've got pretty much, as you can see, what I'm doing is I've got one of like every type of mob, except for the Rots, because all the Rots do, there's no like important thing you need to do with the Rots. It's just move them. So they're just collateral. You don't have to interrupt them, you have to stun them, there's nothing too special. So you want to get one of each type so then people know they're not focusing on too many things. And the rest of it is just nice cleave for the DPS so they can have a fun time. So that's all good. Now, this part where there's 2 Swarmers here, you can pull 1 Swarmer into the skeleton pack there. That does work. I just pull everything because I'm just like, okay, we're about to be finished in this area. Let's just get it done so we can go straight to the boss. Now, pulling 2 Swarmers, it's a little bit risky. Luckily, they both targeted different people. But you do see that it does get to a point where our priest needs to disperse. They're taking a bit too much damage. Luckily, the Enrager wears off, and now they're back onto me. But we still need to do, we're not out of there yet. We still need to make sure. So now they've just enraged again. Gotta make sure we kill those swarmers first, because they are the main target. They're the worst mob. They will kill people if they get bolstered, and if they stay up too long. Okay, so now we've just got a swarm and a lasher left. At this point, I can pull this with the boss, but again, we're just being safe. So I'm gonna pull those two. Lasher and Swarmer, and then we're gonna do this boss. Now this boss it's pretty simple, and a lot of people kind of stay in the middle of the area. You can do that, or you can just use the way that people did it back in BFA when this dungeon did come out, which is moving it to the bone piles over here. So we're just gonna grab Cragmaw. I'm gonna move it to the bone piles, and what you want to do is you have the tank facing this way, or any other way if you want to, and you have almost everyone else in between the boss and one of the bone piles, or like the wall or something, because the boss is going to target one of them and then charge in that direction. Now every time the boss charges or uses an ability, it's going to place these ticks on the floor. Or these maggots, I should say. And you want to make sure you're running over them, otherwise you will get ticks. Like that. So same with Intergestion. I'm going to AMS the Intergestion because it's a magical effect. Very simple for a DK to deal with. Now, the thing that gets most groups in this boss is that people are a bit too lazy and they get a bit of tunnel vision and they just want to kill the boss and not deal with the mechanics. So then what happens is not enough people are running over the maggots, especially during Tantrum, and then your group just gets overwhelmed with ticks. They do a lot of damage, they put a dot on you, and also when they die, they explode. So as you can see now, we got a bunch of ticks. It's getting a little bit spicy now. So we got 5 ticks. Alright, they're putting all these debuffs on us. We're having to put out an SLT or a Spirit Link Totem. Everything's kind of going a little bit crazy here. I'm trying to keep myself up. Healing quite a lot right now. We've got 12 stacks at the moment. I might pop a Purgatory. No. Okay, so we got more ticks as well. So you can see how it gets a bit hectic if people don't keep the same rhythm. So now people are kind of realizing, okay, we need to really make sure these maggots get squashed. Otherwise, we're gonna have another problem. But the boss is almost dead. But you just want to make sure you play this fight slow. You just need to do the mechanics on this fight, and this fight is one of the easiest fights in the dungeon pools. There's really not much going on here, as long as you make sure you squish these maggots. But yeah, besides that, that's pretty simple. You can use this method by putting them over and making them charge the walls and stuff. Also with Intergestion, if you aren't a DK and you can't immune it every single time with an AMS, you can just walk out of the frontal. You don't have to take the damage. Again, this is a 17. It's not going to kill me, so I'm just taking it. But if you want to walk out of it in like a high key, say you're doing like a higher than 20 or something, you can just walk out of it, or you can use a movement ability and just walk out of the range, and then you can run back in. And that'll also give you enough time to run over all of the maggots that the Intergestion does put down. Now over here, all you've got is Reanimated Guardians. You've got the Horror, which keeps doing Void Spit, and then you've got the Death Speaker, which is also the main mob in the skeleton packs that will buff all the skeletons as well. Now as you saw, there was a shield on there. Now the Guardians, once they get to a certain point, they will all have a shield on them. You can just use a Arcane Torrent if you'd like to remove it all. You can use a Master Spell. It's better to get the shields off, otherwise you're just dumping damage into absolutely nothing. As you can see, all the bone shields are on there. That's the shield. I'm probably going to Arcane Torrent there. Beautiful. So that's all gone now. Now again, you got the Death Speaker here. Now the one ability you need to interrupt for the Death Speaker is Wicked Frenzy. That is going to buff absolutely everyone, and they're going to do a lot more damage, and it's not going to be fun. So you have one person designated for that. Now the worm that we were talking about, the Horror, we'll get back to that after the next boss, because there's plenty of those afterwards. Now if you're using MDT, Method Dungeon Tools, you'll probably see that there's extra worms that haven't been actually implemented into the add-on. I don't know as to if it's been changed or updated as per the recording of this video, But last time I checked, they weren't in there. So the route might differ a little bit if they're not implemented in there. So we'll have to have a look and see. But percentage-wise, this route is fine. So you're going to get double Defiler here. Now you want 2 people on each Defiler. There's 2 interrupts you need to get, which are crucial. And then there's 1 ability that you need to move away from, which is going to be the Spirit Totem. So they're both going to cast Shadow Bolt Volley. You need to make sure you interrupt that, otherwise it does a lot of damage to everyone in the area. Interrupts those. The second one is your Withering Curse. This puts a very annoying dot on you, and it will stack the longer it casts. So you want to make sure you interrupt that as well. Besides that, you can summon the Spirit Drain Totem. You just need to move out of it. There's nothing else you need to do. You don't have to kill it or anything. Just move out of it. Very simple. Now, once these die, we're going to go to the third boss, Sporecaller Zancha. Now, this boss gets a bit tricky as well, because people tend to freak out when they're trying to dodge all these spores coming out of the mushrooms. You just got to focus on the one thing, which is staying alive. You don't have to worry about min-maxing your damage, especially at this key level or anything like that. Now we've got well, I'll show you what I mean after this. So the shockwave is going to happen twice per phase on the tank. It's going to do a frontal on the tank. So you want to make sure as the tank you're facing, so that the mushrooms will spawn in a circle around the boss. You need to make sure you're in that circle, in the circumference of that circle, and you're facing this way or the other way. You don't want to be in the middle and facing out towards the circle, because you're going to be hitting less mushrooms, if that makes sense. You want to go in the way of where they're growing, so you can get as much as you can. Now, during the first phase especially, it seems that there's not a lot of removal abilities happening, or it just seems like it, but I'm pretty sure it's the same amount. So you want to, as the tank, or if someone has some sort of immunity, try to collect some of these spores as well. With, for me, AMS, or for anyone else, you can use you can just walk over it, use a defensive, and then you can just dispel it. We've also got the ability that goes out, which is Festering Harvest, which will be coming up soon, which is going to be the explosion that the boss does, which, if there's any of these mushrooms up, is going to do a considerable amount more than it should. So using these upheavals where you can see 2 people get targeted with the arrows on their heads, the tank never gets targeted, by the way, unless some people are dead. You need to make sure that you're placing them far enough from the boss, because there's a travel time from the boss to where the arrow leads. If you're too close to the boss, the upheaval will happen immediately and you'll die. So you need to make sure you're going as far as possible. The tank is the one that deals with the shrooms near the boss. All the other people deal with the shrooms away from the boss, if that makes sense. So as you can see, they're going near them. The travel time will happen from the boss. They move out of the swirl just at the last second. I'm going to go over here and pick up this last one, because that Festering Harvest is going to explode. Luckily, I pick up that last one. It doesn't nearly kill everyone. So it's just minimal damage instead of crazy damage. But you need to make sure the main thing here is getting all of the shrooms, not dying to the upheavals, and dodging the volatile pods. Now this is where people start freaking out, where there's too many things going on. So you've got a shockwave about to happen, you've got the upheavals that just happened, and then you've got the pods about to explode in about 2 seconds. Now the pods are going to spawn all these spores in all directions of each one that spawned. So all you need to do is make sure you're dodging them. But people tend to, freak out, and then they end up getting hit by a bunch of them, and they just get too many stacks and then they die. So if you don't trust yourself with that, use an immunity, use a defensive, get someone to dispel you. A paladin can, a monk can as well. So yeah, I'm pretty sure a priest can. I think. I'll have to look up on that. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, so that's pretty much a rinse and repeat. There's nothing really else to look at. It's just it's a pretty highly dense fight. There's just a lot going on. It does get a bit clustered, but if you just stay calm, it should be okay. it shouldn't be too bad. Now, we're just going to get a res off here. I'm going to go down this way. Now, we've got the worm that I was talking about before, which is the grotesque horror, and we've also got another defiler, which are the two mobs we did before Sporecaller just then. So what you're going to do here is going to have 2 people dedicated to the defiler. You've got 1 person on the horror. The Void Spit really doesn't do that much damage. It used to do a lot, and it used to do an AoE. Now they've kind of changed it, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure this used to do an AoE. So the Void Spit itself doesn't do that much. What you really want to interrupt here is the Dark Echoes. This, even if it gets a tick off, will do a considerable amount of damage to the group. So you need to be very quick with this ability, because this cast time is quite quick. So as you can see, the Dark Echoes goes off, almost kills everybody. I think the Shadowbolt Volley went off as well, actually. So the Withering Curse, as you can see, that tick went off, so we all have a 15-second curse now, which is not fun. But you just want to make sure you're killing these as soon as possible, and as evenly as possible. Again, 1 person on the horror should be enough. 2 people dedicated to the Defiler, 1 for the Shadowbolt Volley, 1 for the Curse. Otherwise, things will get very spicy, indeed. So, upcoming now is going to be the part where I was explaining how MDT doesn't really have the extra worms inbuilt into their routes, because it seems like Blizzard has added the worms in here and MDT didn't add them in there. Again, I could be wrong. I'll just have to check again after recording this video. But we're going to go into here, and there's a Death Speaker. Now there's a worm here too. So, once again, 1 person dedicated on the Death Speaker to get the Enraged Frenzy cast. And then you want to make sure you Master Spell or you Arcane Torrent all the shields off, so you're not doing random damage to nothing. And then you also want to make sure someone has that Dark Echoes kick or stun on the Grotesque Horror. Otherwise, it does get a little bit crazy. So once we kill all this, we've got the fun stuff, which are going to be the big boys in the dungeon. This does tend to get a lot of people with their frontal, which is the fear that the Faceless Corruptor does. And I see a lot of people have trouble with the tentacles that it spawns too. So every time we do these, we're going to have a horror again. We know what to do with the horror. Now the Corruptor has 2 abilities. It's got Abyssal Reach, where it's going to put these tentacles on the ground. Now it doesn't show you where they're going to hit. You just can't be in the hitbox of these tentacles. So you just got to move. Just don't be anywhere near them, because they're going to slam in any direction, and they could kill you very quickly. So you just don't be anywhere near them. They'll slam down. And now the Maddening Gaze here is going to do a frontal. It's going to go purple, and it's going to face a direction. It's going to do a giant frontal. Just don't be in it, otherwise you're going to be feared for a long time, and you're probably going to pull something. And if you accidentally pull another Grotesque Horror, because there's a bunch of them just underground around here, it gets very, very, very bad. Very, very quickly. Because they just free cast on the side. And there's no way for the tank to be in melee range of this horror, and then this horror, or this horror. And it goes wild. So once you've killed this, we're going to skip this horror here. And we're just going to go to the last pack here. So it's going to be double of the Corruptors, and it's going to be 1 horror as well. So what you can do here is that you have everyone stacking on the tank, or you can have everyone stacking behind the Corruptors. And what that's going to do is going to bait both Corruptors to face the same direction when they do their fear, instead of having 1 Corruptor go this way and 1 Corruptor go that way. It's the easiest way to do with it, and you can also have the tank it on the left side, wait for the Abyssal Tentacles to drop, and then you can move it to the right and everyone can be in a safe space, instead of having to like move around and duck and weave between all the mechanics, where it can get a little bit dicey, and you never know, like there's just too many things to dodge, you see what I mean? Like there's just tentacles everywhere, there's just frontals going off, there's a Corruptor that you've got to interrupt, like people are going to freak out. So you want to make it as the tank, you want to make it as smooth as possible, but you also want your team to kind of understand what can be baited, what can be interrupted, what are the main targets and all that stuff. So having all these little things really does make a giant difference in terms of leading your team into a comfortable and clean dungeon run. So once we've killed all these, we're just going to stand next to this doorway here, and we're just going to wait for the Titan to come in and open the doorway for us. And then we'll get ported to the last boss. Now, Unbound Abomination. This one is quite simple as well. There are some times where it does get a little dicey, because I have noticed that the stacking dot that you get, sometimes you don't get the light that's supposed to clear it very quickly. And the healing requirement does get a little bit high, but most of the time it's okay. So what you're doing here is everyone's going to be stacking on the tank, and what you're doing is you're facing the boss where I am right now, and then you're going to move the boss and you're going to face it again on the previous pile you just placed. So what you're doing here is the boss doesn't take damage due to his health per se. You're just trying to increase this secondary bar here, which is technically its health. Every time you increase the bar to 100, it'll drop 2 adds. You kill the adds, and then it'll drop by 33%. So that's kind of just like there's 3 phases, or 3 individual phases. So you just have to do that 3 times. That's the easiest way to understand it. So you see how we're baiting it to the same direction. Now make sure you're on and you're stacked on with everybody. Now the Visage is the one that spawns. There's one here, and then there's one on the other side where the Titan just cleanses himself. And now if you don't focus on this, the Titan will walk over here and just cleanse it himself anyway, so it's not really needed. You can kill that quicker to make the boss quicker if you want to, but it's not like you have to kill the adds in order for the bar to start going up again. You can just immediately start hitting the boss and it'll still go up. Now, throughout the fight, you've got all these little circles on the ground that are going to spawn. They can be removed by the cleansing aura that comes up here. Now, the person with the cleansing aura needs to make sure they're on everyone else to remove this stacking dot, which is very painful if it gets to high stacks. Now, you also don't want to be walking into any of these rotting spores, otherwise it'll do a lot of damage as well. As you saw, one of our DPS did unfortunately die. I'm pretty sure to that. But yeah, that's pretty much the fight. What you want to do with the rotting spores, as you can see with our shaman, he's putting a healing rain down, and what that's gonna do is it does damage as well with acid rain. And anytime the rotting spores come anywhere close to contact with the healing rain, it'll just drop. You can also do this with Starfall, which is what was normally done with Boomkins, or you can just have anyone with some sort of AoE. Like I can put Death and Decay in the middle of there and get rid of it. Or you can put like an Earthquake in there or anything like that. And it'll just make it a lot easier because they won't cut you off. Because if you have these spores cutting you off in the middle and you're trying to go around, it does get a little dicey. But besides that, that was the Underrot. Yeah, first guide of Dragonflight, Season 2. Just a pretty quick summarization of Underrot. But if there's anything I've missed, or if there's anything I can add, please make sure you let me know in the comment section below. This was a very, like, spur-of-the-moment guide. I don't really edit too much. I'm trying to get used to editing, or learn it at least. So if you have any tips on that, let me know as well, because I really want to get back into YouTube and do this properly. But if you have any questions, or you just want to get some help with keys, I do community key runs pretty much every day over at twitch.tv/triplebs. I'll put a link in the description. If you need help with any tank mechanics or tank basics or learning routes or pushing yourself to another level in tanking and WoW, please feel free to look at my coaching page as well, which will also be in the link in the description. But besides that, thank you very much for watching. Peace out, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe.